chosen ones. You were never meant to live an ordinary life. Your breath is stitched into the fabric of prophecy. Every step you've taken, every whisper you've heard in dreams has echoed across centuries, heard by mystics, feared by empires, and one man saw it more clearly than most: Nostradamus. In his cryptic verses, he foresaw a time when the veil would thin, the stars would shudder, and a singular being, neither angel nor mortal, would ignite the final unraveling. That being was not a metaphor. It was you, whose DNA hums with forgotten frequencies. You, whose thoughts sometimes fracture time itself. Nostradamus spoke in riddles to evade the watchers of his age, but buried in the lines of century texts, verse 72, is the spark of a cosmic truth. The collapse would not begin with war, nor plague, nor fire, but with awareness. A realization so powerful, so precise, it would fracture the false timelines built by shadow architects. They called it the collapse, but it is not destruction. It is correction. The world you see, the clocks, the currencies, the creeds, is not the world that was meant to be. It is a simulation imposed upon a fractured reality. You were born with the key in your soul and the code in your voice. Nostradamus knew this, and so did those who tried to erase his truest predictions. They failed. This journey you are about to take is not a history lesson. It is a decoding of a timeline you were never supposed to remember. The collapse will not be a future event. It has already begun. And each time you feel like something doesn't fit, it's the simulation trembling. The stars are aligning, the watchers are waking, the prophecies are converging. You are not reading these words by accident. You've pierced the dream. Now, through these lost verses and forbidden insights, you will walk through the fire Nostradamus foresaw. It was not the loud prophecies that carried the greatest weight. It was the silent ones, the scribbled margins, the ink-smudged annotations, the verses that were never published but hidden in locked drawers. Among the scattered leaves of Nostradamus's final quatrains, one parchment fragment bore no number, no title, just symbols, faded Latin, and a diagram that spiraled inward like a collapsing star. For centuries, scholars dismissed it as an unfinished draft, but to those who know the codes, it was something far more dangerous. A concealed warning written for one set of eyes only. The parchment described a vessel of flesh, born in the age of false light, who carries within them the collapse seed. It didn't reference a comet or a kingdom, but a single being whose awakening would distort the axis of time. Time, as Nostradamus hinted in the symbols, was not a line but a lens. And when that lens is shattered by consciousness, the simulation that uses it to render reality can no longer maintain coherence. Events begin folding in on themselves. History rewrites itself. Futures cancel. This was not just prophecy. It was a countdown mechanism encoded in metaphor. The being described was no ruler, no warrior, no priest. They were unnamed and unclaimed. They walked unnoticed, masked by mundanity. But every breath they took drew the collapse nearer. If you felt timelines blur around you, déjà vu that loops too often, people remembering events that never happened, or days that feel off for no reason, this is not madness. It's leakage, fractures, echoes of time no longer able to hold its form. When translated fully, the last line of the verse doesn't warn of doom. It whispers of a door. When the seed awakens, the mirrored dome shall crack, and the waters of memory shall return. That line has haunted every secret society that's ever had access to it. Because if true, it means time was tampered with, reality was reshaped, and only one being can undo the distortion. When Nostradamus spoke of fire, he wasn't always describing war or devastation. Often, it was a spiritual fire, an ignition of soul force that refused to be contained. One peculiar quatrain refers to a son of the East, crowned in silence, whose flame shall split stone. To the untrained eye, it's allegory. But hidden beneath the veiled language is a resonance unmistakable to the initiated. This flame was not kindled in Rome or Babylon. It came from Galilee. Throughout Nostradamus's more esoteric texts, especially those never published, there are scattered references that align uncannily with the life of Yeshua. One verse describes a man walking on water, not for miracle, but for memory. Another details a healer who carried the collapse within his ribs, a phrase eerily close to the lost Gospel of Thomas, where Yeshua said, "Split a piece of wood, I am there." The implication is not that Yeshua caused collapse, but that he demonstrated what a collapse in linear time looked like when embodied. Reality bent around him, time bowed, systems fractured. But Nostradamus went further. He suggested that the being who would trigger the final collapse would not come as a preacher or redeemer, but as an anomaly born within the system itself. A silent echo of the Nazarene, not his return, but his reflection. One who doesn't wear robes or bear a crown, but carries the same ignition spark deep within their soul. A flame that can't be extinguished, only delayed. That's why the systems were built. That's why religions were weaponized. Not to reveal him, but to obscure the path he walked. Because if others walked it too, if someone like you stepped beyond the veil, they feared what would come undone. Prophecy is often a warning, disguised as a riddle, and when Nostradamus wrote of the flame that births the mirror's death, it was both homage and hint. Yeshua collapsed perception, but he did so as a preview. You were born to do it as an event. Long before humanity etched prophecy onto parchment, the cosmos had already written its own script. The ancients knew this, not through telescopes, but through trance alignment and vibration. What modern science calls constellations, ancient initiates understood as encoded gateways, stellar frequencies that anchored timelines. Nostradamus, trained in the mysteries of astrology beyond what the public records admit, believed the stars didn't just predict events, they enforced them. In one suppressed letter found in the Vatican archives, Nostradamus warned that certain star alignments were not just symbolic, but mechanical. They were triggers, keys placed within the fabric of sky to maintain or collapse a simulation. He described a configuration, an intersection of Saturn, Uranus, and the fixed star Algol, that would act like a cosmic override. And when it appears, time would fracture and start to invert. That configuration has already occurred. It aligned during your lifetime, not centuries from now, not in some apocalyptic tomorrow. It happened quietly, unannounced, while the world was distracted by headlines and artificial fears. And with it came subtle glitches, old patterns collapsing, secrets surfacing, timelines diverging. Nostradamus hinted that this moment would awaken a sleeper of flame, a being encoded to respond instinctively when the stars aligned. You. Because your essence isn't just spiritual, It's astrological. It hums in sync with the frequencies of collapsed stars and distant novas. You've likely felt the pull of certain constellations without understanding why. That's not coincidence. That's resonance. Nostradamus didn't merely write poetry. He embedded codes. And those codes have now reached critical activation. What frightened the powers behind the veil was not the prophecy itself. It was the precision of it. They couldn't stop the stars from moving. They couldn't stop you from being born under them. So they built illusions, digital mirrors, endless distractions, to delay what they couldn't destroy. In the lost writings attributed to Nostradamus, those confiscated by inquisitors and buried beneath cathedrals, there is a peculiar symbol, a wheel with 12 spokes, burning at the center with an eye. Around it, in faint ink, a phrase appears: "The Son of Man shall ride the wheel backward." Scholars dismissed it as apocalyptic metaphor, but the initiates knew it spoke of something more profound, a being who would walk against the spin of time itself. To understand this, we must return to the teachings of Yeshua, who often spoke in paradox. "Before Abraham was, I am," he once said, a phrase that bent linear logic into knots. It wasn't poetry. It was physics of a higher order. Time, for Yeshua, was not a straight line, but a construct, a tool to be stepped in and out of. The Son of Man was not just a title, it was a function, one who moved through time without being bound by it. Nostradamus, influenced by both Hebraic mysticism and secret Templar knowledge, understood this. In one encoded prophecy, he speaks of a mirror-born heir who shall carry the sun's breath but not his name, and turn the wheel in reverse. This wasn't about a return to the past, but about collapsing the illusion of progression itself, a being whose consciousness would dissolve time's artificial layers, a second embodiment, not to repeat the first, but to complete it, that wheel of time. It is not turning, it is cracking. If you've ever felt like time distorts around you, like certain moments stretch while others blink out, this is not delusion. It's interference. You, like him, are beginning to remember, not through memory, but through frequency. The very spin of time resists your presence. That's why things fall apart when you grow more aware. The systems rely on forgetting. You are remembering. And as you remember, the wheel groans under the pressure of your awakening. The question Nostradamus could never answer, the one even Yeshua hinted at with silence rather than speech, remains unresolved in every timeline. When the Son of Man walked through time, the veil trembled. Buried beneath the polished floors of European palaces and Vatican vaults are records never meant for public eyes. These are not archives of history. They are logs of surveillance, not on governments or kings, but on anomalies. Individuals who slipped through the cracks of controlled time, who caused ripples simply by existing. And at the center of these reports, repeated in different names, different languages, over centuries, is you. There has always been a secret council. Their names have changed. Phoenician priesthoods, Roman orders, modern think tanks. But their purpose has not. Their sole directive has been containment. Not of war, not of disease, but of collapse events triggered by conscious beings stepping outside the timeline's script. Nostradamus knew of them. He called them les voiles, the veils. They were not villains in his visions. They were terrified caretakers, trembling before a force they could neither control nor kill, destiny unbound. One fragment, found in a hidden margin of his personal journal, describes a dream. In it, a council of robed figures watch a sleeping body suspended in golden light. They debate whether to extinguish it or let it awaken. One figure says, "If it wakes, the sky will bleed." Another replies, "If it sleeps, the lie remains." Nostradamus did not reveal the council's decision, but the fear in his words suggests the being was left alive, barely. And now, that being is you. Why the fear? Because your consciousness is disruptive. Because your dreams bleed into reality. Because systems short-circuit when you speak truth. You don't follow scripts, you unwrite them. Every attempt to box you into identity, belief, or hierarchy has failed. And with each failure, the control grids weaken. The council still exists. It watches. It calculates. It knows you are no longer dormant. Strange malfunctions in global networks, inexplicable fluctuations in data fields, bursts of synchronicities that seem too sharp. They're not random. They are their sensors going haywire. They sense the collapse approaching, not from the outside, but from within you. Among Nostradamus's most debated verses lies a curious pair of symbols: a lamb crowned in stars, and a phoenix rising from a bed of shattered mirrors. Most scholars interpret this as a metaphor for renewal following destruction, but those who understand the ancient codes know better. This was not metaphor, it was alignment, a convergence of two forces, one who bore the light, and one who would carry its fire into the final age. The lamb has always been a symbol of Yeshua, gentle, sacrificial, radiant in innocence. But the phoenix, that was never about rebirth alone. It was about something that could only rise after the lie burned. In one obscure passage of Nostradamus's writings, he notes, "The lamb walked willingly into the fire, but the fire shall walk out as phoenix in flesh." A cryptic line, until you understand its implications. Yeshua was not the end of prophecy. He was the ignition. His presence broke time. His death reset the field, and his resurrection seeded the code that would one day awaken in another. In you. Because the phoenix isn't reborn from its own death. It's reborn from the ruins of a world no longer sustainable. You've likely felt it, the burn in your chest when truth is near, the destruction of relationships and paths that no longer serve your vibration. That's not chaos, that's calibration. A silent fire moving through your life to prepare you for emergence. The systems that were built to hide Yeshua's true legacy, time loops, ritual symbols, false doctrines, are now being incinerated in your presence. You don't just wake up from the illusion, you torch it. And in doing so, you embody both roles, the innocence of the lamb and the power of the phoenix. This is what the secret prophecies feared. Not just a return of Christ energy, but its evolution, expressed through someone who burns the veil completely, not to cleanse it, but to expose it. The ashes are already falling, the mirrors are cracking, and the fire no longer asks for permission. There is a rhythm to celestial deception. The moon weeps silver while the sun bleeds gold, and both have been used as tools in the manipulation of time. Nostradamus hinted at this in a veiled quatrain. When the moon sheds tears and the sun gives blood, the child of inversion shall awaken beneath twin shadows. For centuries, this was dismissed as poetic gloom, but hidden within the verse was a reference to eclipse cycles, moments when day and night invert, when truth can briefly pierce the veil. You were born near one of these convergences. That's not coincidence, it's calibration. The eclipse is more than a spectacle. It's a tear in the script. During those few minutes, ancient codes buried beneath layers of false time become visible. The tears of the moon, echoes of memory, the blood of the sun, reclaimed light. Both are messengers, not metaphors. In many occult traditions, eclipses were feared, not because of darkness, but because of the clarity they brought. The illusion weakens when the sky itself misbehaves. Systems designed to bind your perception scramble during these events. Frequencies destabilize. Portals reactivate. And those with collapsed DNA signatures, like yours, begin to stir, as if something ancient inside you remembers its purpose. You've likely felt strange during eclipses, heart racing, dreams vivid, a sense of standing at the edge of something vast, unnamed. These sensations aren't emotional, they're navigational. Your body responding to temporal shifts that most ignore. Nostradamus wrote that the child of inversion would not just witness the collapse, but anchor it, not by force, but by alignment. Your very presence during these cycles sends shock waves through the artificial structure of time. That's why they ritualize these celestial events, why the elite gather, why old rites are reenacted, not to celebrate, but to contain. Because when someone like you stands fully awake during the tears and the blood, the simulation trembles. Codes hidden in the moonlight begin to activate. The false timeline hiccups, and the veil grows thin enough to rip. But the eclipses are no longer hiding, they are increasing, intensifying. The stories told of Yeshua walking upon water were not merely miracles. They were metaphors hiding metaphysics. To defy the laws of nature so publicly was not an act of performance, but a statement. This world is not what you think it is. Beneath the surface of the sea, beneath the surface of the story, lies a deeper truth, one that Nostradamus hinted at in his most encrypted visions. In a lesser-known quatrain, he wrote, "The one who crosses without vessel shall echo the Nazarene, yet speak not his name. Where the waves part for flesh, the veil shall thin." What most missed was the implication. Someone would come not to reenact the miracle, but to exceed its scope. Where Yeshua bent the rules of one realm, another would shatter the walls between them. That's you. You don't merely cross dimensions, you dissolve their boundaries. If Yeshua proved time was pliable, you were born to prove that space is a lie. Have you not felt it? That sense of existing in multiple scenes at once, the recurring dreams that feel more solid than waking life, the pull toward places you've never visited but somehow remember. These are not glitches in your mind. They are bleed-throughs, evidence that your consciousness no longer fits inside a single timeline. Those close to you may sense it. The way animals pause when you enter a room. The way children stare like they recognize you from somewhere beyond. You leave imprints in fields you do not see. The very air seems to shimmer when you speak from the center of your truth. Nostradamus foresaw this. He referenced a mirrored one, whose steps leave ripples that disrupt the hologram, not because they seek to destroy, but because they carry a vibration too real to be contained, a frequency that dissolves illusion by its very presence. Yeshua opened the doorway, but he never closed it. And now, someone like you stands in its frame, not asking permission to enter, but realizing you never left. So if he walked on water to reveal the lie of gravity, time doesn't flow. It is cycled, reset, rewritten. That's the secret the ancient elite have kept guarded across every empire, every regime. Time isn't a river. It's an hourglass. And once in an age, the glass is flipped. Not because of catastrophe, not because of war, but because of you. Nostradamus made cryptic references to the child born in stillness during the silence between pulses. He described not an event, but a birth. One so precisely timed that the moment itself marked the shift of an era. The world may not have noticed. The sky didn't split, the stars didn't fall, but the simulation felt it. And so did the hourglass. This is why so much of your life has felt inverted, like you arrived too early or too late, like you're not synced to the same rhythm as those around you, because you're not. The rules recalibrated around your arrival, and everything that came before had to begin unraveling, subtly, then suddenly. Patterns started breaking. People began waking, not in droves but in waves. The timeline, once stable in its deception, began to stutter. You are the anomaly they couldn't anticipate, the prophecy they hoped to distort, the variable Nostradamus encoded in obscure metaphors because to name you outright would trigger the systems before you were ready. One of his last writings mentions a figure with no face, whose birth resets the clock of kings. That's not legend. That's architecture. And it's happening now. Every collapse you witness, every institution crumbling before your eyes, is not coincidence. It's a symptom. The hourglass has flipped, and the grains that fall now do so in reverse. But here's the piece even Nostradamus only hinted at. Once the hourglass flips, time cannot be set right by systems. Only awareness can anchor it. That's why your awakening matters. Not just as a spark, but as a stabilizer. The systems are scrambling, the architects are panicking, the watchers are watching. Because they know you weren't just born into the collapse. The world fears the word collapse because it associates it with death, ruin, and chaos. But Nostradamus saw beyond that illusion. In his most obscure notes, those hidden in ciphered verses and inverted Latin, he wrote of collapse not as destruction, but as unveiling. The towers fall not to end the kingdom, he wrote, but to show the sky was never real. Every prophecy of doom, every apocalyptic warning, every shattered vision of the future has been misunderstood. The collapse is not punishment. It's release. It's the peeling back of the false skin draped over humanity's eyes. It's the moment when the program crashes, not because of error, but because you finally stopped complying. In one of his last symbolic sketches, Nostradamus drew a figure standing at the edge of a shattered world, not broken, but reborn. Behind them, the old systems crumbled like sandcastles. Before them, a vortex of light, geometry, and infinite possibility. Beneath the sketch, a single phrase. The revelation is not a war, it is a mirror. Yeshua spoke in similar tones. The kingdom of heaven is within you. But what happens when you stop looking at the world and begin projecting from within? That's what the collapse makes possible. It's not the erasure of the earth. It's the deletion of the lie layered over it. The veil isn't burning down to leave nothing behind. It's being torn so something true can finally emerge. This entire timeline has been running on borrowed code. It fed on fear, on repetition, on suppression of the divine spark. But that spark, that anomaly, that rupture in the script, that's you. You are not the fire that destroys. You are the fire that reveals. Not because you want power, but because you are power finally waking up. This is what they've tried to prevent. This is what they feared you'd remember. That the collapse was never something to stop. It was something to embody.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.